Now that Worlds has officially wrapped up, I thought I would break down every controversy that happened at Worlds that you may or may not know. And let me tell you, there was a lot more player involvement in these controversies than I kind of expected, and it gets a little weird. But with that, let's break down all the controversies. And I think we gotta start with the biggest one, and that would be New London. Now, this is one of those controversies that everyone is on board with. This is the notion that the back 7 holes at New London will be repurposed for a business development, which obviously just feels ridiculous. Like, I think the city of Bedford and Paul just spent like 5 years setting up this whole course, redeveloping it, repurposing it, and it might just totally get dropped or reworked based upon what I believe to be a bid that was already accepted by the city. I don't even know what that looks like. I assume it's just office buildings, which obviously makes everyone upset. And looking at this land, it's not even good land. Like, it's just trails with a bunch of trees. I don't really know why you'd choose this specific spot for business development, but it left everyone feeling upset, and there was a bunch of signs saying "Save New London." So this entire course, while it was epic, may never exist back on tour, or if it does, it might look totally different, at least for the back half, which sucks, man. But to add on to that, another controversy was the notion of the course's layouts and difficulty. Now, watching and filming these rounds, I had a great grasp of how difficult these courses played for these pros. And for the most part, I thought it was super fair. I thought all of these fairways were designed in a way that it had to challenge your ability to hit shots and make sure the disc falls right in the center of the fairway and not go out of bounds. This led to a bunch of OBs, probably more OBs than like any course I can remember besides like maybe 2021 Worlds at Emporia. And honestly, I think that's what led to Kristen's downfall with so many out of bounds. This is the course that they were all given. There was no favoritism. So I think while it was definitely a little difficult, especially Ivy Hill, more so than New London, but somebody said it is a bunch of easy and difficult holes. And I think that is so true. There is no medium difficult holes. They all are kind of easy or kind of crazy hard. And this level of constant whiplash for the players really felt like an interesting development. Like, I don't know any other courses that are like that. And I think with this first showing from New London, it really lived up to the hype and really felt reminiscent of Northwood Black, where yes, there was a lot of OB, but for the most part, it is basically just natural OB, and it reminded me so much of the scene from Harry Potter where Ron has to relax and he just cannot.
Whoa. You have to relax. If you don't, it'll only kill you faster.
Kill us faster? Now what are we gonna do?
I saw this with so many players. They would get in the woods in a very uncomfortable position, and they just could not figure out a way out of it. That was especially true for Gannon Burr in his round 3 at New London, where he was just hitting trees left and right. And for me personally, I think the best players right now are Kristen and Gannon, and if you make both of them kind of squirm on a course, then I think you're doing something right. I think Ivy Hill had a couple of things that I really wanted tweaked a little bit, and I only really saw this after it was being played. When I saw it beforehand, I was like, yeah, this is really cool, really unique. It felt like a real life version of Disc Golf Valley, and I think you know the exact holes I'm talking about, 4 and 14. 4 being the hay bale hole where you throw it downhill and there's water behind the basket. I would say the big thing that players disliked was the amount of randomness. Now, there was a specific way to play this hole, I believe, and that was a lot of hyzer to the right, having it skip up around the hay bales and go up to the basket, making it not too close to the hay bales and not too close to the water. And I saw a lot of players, both MPO and FPO, do this great, but while the fan experience was awesome for this, watching so many players skip over the hay bale or not, it was super hype. I think the players don't like that level of randomness because you just don't know how it will end up on a percentage level. You might get it 70% of the time, but the other times you did the exact same shot and still got punished. And especially for FPO starting in the morning when the grass was all wet, it also skipped differently than it would later in the day. But I think the introduction of a hole that looks like this is very interesting, even if I don't think it was actually rewarding the best play. And this is very true again for hole 14. There were so many rollaways and so many unfair chainouts, and I'm not even sure if it was like a bad basket issue. I think it was the upward angle and the amount of power that they put in their putts that would chain out. But all this to say, I think a lot of players that played great got punished unfairly for this hole. And honestly, I think a totally fine rework would be maybe widen the OB a little bit and make a hay bale on the bottom of the hill, so you still have a treacherous upward putt if you miss, but the rollaways don't punish your entire tournament chances, aka Holland and Nicholas. They got so punished for shots that were really not that bad or just dead center chainouts. But besides those holes, I know people said it was like another boring golf course, but I honestly think this might be one of my favorite courses I have ever seen. The amount of elevation cannot be summed up on coverage. It was a crazy hike, and it was truly a workout to play this course. I don't think any other course is actually a true workout. And since I walked over 40 miles on these courses, I think I can safely say it is a true workout, and especially in the heat, it rewards people that have a high level of endurance, which I truly don't think you see in many tournaments at all. And I think the hot rounds of these courses really do showcase that it really wasn't impossible. It just required dead center accuracy again again and again, which is exactly what we're looking for a world level course. And in addition to this, on hole 13, specifically for FPO, they were in a spot where they had to throw what was alleged to be 270 to like an open area, which may have been actually true, but you'd be on the very far left side, still probably 500 feet to go to the pin. So you had a lot of FPO players incapable of getting it in bounds. And in round 2, there was only one birdie. And this concern with distance was brought up again on hole 17, with it being 366 to the pin, but probably placed closer to 400. And basically nobody was willing or able to even get to the pin, so they would just play for par, leading to one birdie in round 4 and 3 birdies in round 2. Now, having some of these holes that are kind of a gimmick to MPO and kind of impossible to FPO, I don't think that's terrible, but it does lead to kind of terrible score separation because you are basically getting pars in these holes, which is just not that interesting. And if you like this content and want to support this channel, go down to wildrunsdiscgolf.com and use code WORLDS24 for 24% off your order. It's probably the largest discount I'll ever do because it's kind of dumb, but don't miss out on good deals. So with that, back to the video. Now, the last course related controversy had to be the hilarious jug looking trophy. I'm not exactly sure what it's trying to be, whether it's like a jug of wine or like maple syrup, which reminds me of Maple Hill, which is funny because the tournament director is Nate Heinold, who runs Maple Hill. And a lot of people were saying, is this from Maple Hill? But while it does look a little goofy, I kind of like authenticity. So even though it's a little funny and it got a little hate, I think it looks cool, but I truly don't think anything will ever rival the old school GBO trophies of the old school era. And before we get to the final like big weird controversy, let's talk about coverage. We all know it was terrible. Good old Ganon blur was on full effect this weekend, and you could not tell what was what at certain points in the stream, specifically in New London, which is very sad because I know the streaming equipment they're using is not cheap and they pay a lot for it, but there are inklings of a certain person working with Jeff Spring to make it a lot better. So if that does end up happening, that would be sweet. But for now, we deal with some of the most terrible coverage I have ever witnessed, rivaling Champions Cup last year. And this is such a tragedy because as somebody filming all these courses, it was immaculate. There was nothing wrong with the look and feel of New London. So the fact that nobody was able to see it in clear quality is such a bummer. Now I will say fans on site were not able to see a ton of some of these holes, but that's just the way it goes with wooded courses. Like I was filming and I didn't even know where some of these discs were going because your landing zone is basically totally blind on a lot of these holes, kind of like I believe hole 5 where everyone was spectating. It is totally blind for a lot of these players, so you don't even know if you're in bounds besides like a flag. Now because it is so blind, there was moments of huge backups, and it was hilarious seeing Paul talk to Nate Heinold being like, what the heck, why are there so many backups on this hole? And I think it was in part to giving space between cards, but for viewers watching the stream, you should have the best vantage point because you have 2 independent points of cameramen from the drive and where they ended up. So the fact that so many holes were blurry or even totally down to stream quality is such a bad look for the tour, because the more events I go to, I know all the cameramen on these events are doing phenomenal work. They work so hard and you don't even see it. So the fact that the final product doesn't even look that good is something that we need to improve upon, but this might be the cost of filming in the woods, at least for this current point in time with their live streaming equipment. But I will say in person, it was the most hype event I've ever been to. So honestly, I loved it, but I can totally understand why people would be fed up with this level of quality for the stream. All right, and the final controversy has to be this weird post by Hailey King. And just a little side happy vibe before we get to negative vibes. Nico did cash for the 17th year in a row at Worlds. So good on you, Nico. That's really cool, actually. But the final controversy is Hailey King posting about how the area of Central Virginia and Lynchburg is racist, homophobic, and a dangerous place to be for a person of color, ending it by saying hole 5 was an unmarked slave quarters to the T of hole 6 is purely disrespectful no matter what way you look at it. And people had a lot to say about this, including people that actually live in Lynchburg and kind of know a little bit more than Hailey. And this local person said, they have no clue what it is or the history, so we really only have an inference. And yes, Lynchburg had a history of slavery, just like the entire eastern and southern US, but we can't change what happened 150 to 300 years ago. If you have an issue with such things, don't play instead of paying for money and then complain after getting your check. Also, what a slap in the face. The whole city prepared for months for Worlds. We cheered you on every single round. The city has over double the average national population of African Americans, and you will call it not diverse. Sounds like a sore loser who is upset you didn't win or get podium. And I just love it. I love it. And yes, if you do go to Lynchburg Museum site, in 1860, Lynchburg was the home of one of the largest trading and auctioning of slaves, and it all just feels like a made-up controversy where it didn't need to be. At least in my head, this is the equivalent of saying I'm not going to go to Germany because they have a history of concentration camps. Like, I mean, yeah, it happened, but that does not mean you can't go anywhere close to where these events actually occurred. It is a part of history, and honestly, to me, I think one of the biggest things is to not just ignore these places, but learn what occurred and learn from the past. Just hearing Lynchburg, you may think of it as like a tiny no-name town that just happens to be where New London and Foundation and Overthrow reside, but they're definitely not a small town with a lot of culture. And like the commentator said, they spent months and months preparing for this event. I cannot understate how much love and support the entire city gave for these disc golfers. We were literally in the backyards of people, especially for Ivy Hill, and they were all so gracious. They were like, thank you so much for coming to our town. It really means the world that you would come to our city and support our economy. So having no joke what feels like 100 people saying thank you for coming makes this whole notion of the city being like not safe, super racist. It's all just weirdly problematic for no reason. If anything, I truly don't think there's been more support from any city than maybe Emporia. And Hailey brought up another point about how Peoria is related to like KKK roots, and I won't even get into that, but it's essentially just not true. So even though that probably wasn't the most fun topic, I hope you guys did learn a little bit about all the controversies that happened at Worlds. But as somebody just watching the live stream, I'm sure you probably did not have all this context, so now you do. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. I really appreciate all of you, and thank you so much to all the fans that came up and said hi to me. It really validated all the work that I put into this channel, so thank you guys so much. So with that, Wild Runs, signing out, peace.